Hi, it's counselor and educator Dr. Greg Jantz. Childhood trauma. Two words that are, in a way, chilling. Two words that we'd rather not even talk about. Childhood trauma. Next, on hope and possibilities, and how do we actually have hope from childhood trauma?
Dr. Gregory Jantz is a best-selling author of over 45 books and the founder of the Center A Place of Hope, voted a top 10 center for depression treatment in the U.S. As the pioneer of whole person care, Dr. Jantz is known as the messenger of hope. Now the nation's expert on anxiety, depression, substance abuse, relationships, trauma, and PTSD, here is Dr. Gregory Jantz.
Hi, it's Dr. Greg Jantz. I've got a topic today, and as a counselor now for 40 years, I just want to acknowledge a topic that never is easy to talk about. It's one we're doing today. It's childhood trauma. It's an area that I've written a couple books on. The most recent is Triumph Over Trauma. I just want to mention that here right up front. And I'm going to go fast, and this is an overview of childhood trauma, but childhood trauma comes in many forms. It could be loss of a parent early on, could have been abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. It could have been unmet emotional needs or neglect. Childhood abuse, and there's a term now called ACE, adverse childhood experiences. All this falls under the trauma heading, where it could be a one-time event or it could have been a series of events over time. And I write here in the book that it can leave deep, unseen scars that will affect our mental health and our relationships long into adulthood. And I want to just describe to you childhood trauma. And we're talking about this today because there are so many individuals that not only can relate to this, but have had childhood trauma who are seeking help, and we want to seek the right kind of help. Now, some think of childhood trauma as it's an innocent time, and things happen, and we're all supposed to be okay. But kids can go through some especially right now, through a pandemic, through everything that kids are faced with in social media and cyberbully, digital bully behavior. It's just more common than what we ever realized. Reports are, and this is going to vary, but reports are up to 2/3 of children go through some sort of at least one, and I'm looking at the research here, one traumatic event before their 16th birthday. One traumatic event. Here's just some examples. I've mentioned physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. Even witnessing abuse. Maybe you were not the target of it, but you were witnessing it. You could have witnessed domestic violence, for example, and that would be included. Foster care, where you were forced into a family separation against your desires, and something didn't turn out well, and it could be very traumatic in those early ages. Even surviving a close traumatic call like having survived maybe a near-death experience swimming, for example. Those can be exceedingly traumatic. Any form of loss of a loved one, loss of a caretaker, loss of somebody who was really integral in meeting emotional needs. Could have been a grandparent, could have been anybody in your life that had that role. Even as you got a little bit older, maybe you had a mentor and significant loss there. Now, a lot of other things we could put on my list, but those are the brief overview of what we see most of the time. Now, any event that feels threatening to your safety can be considered traumatic. Any event that feels like it's threatening your safety and fear and anxiety enter in, think of that happening repeated times. And early on, you can develop what I'm calling an anticipatory anxiety problem issue. So there are, and my notes here, I made a heading, unseen scars of childhood abuse. And I just want to pause as we were talking about this. If you have been on the receiving end of any of this, it can be extremely frustrating and just seeking help, or you feel like nothing can be done, or maybe you feel like you've been in counseling a long time and nothing has changed. And I just want to say, I get that. So often we have folks who come to us at the Center, a Place of Hope, and they will say things like, I think this is my last hope. I've tried so many different things. So if that's you, that's a fairly common experience as we're dealing with childhood trauma. Now, a lot of times as an adult, we don't connect the dots and realize, oh, that's why I have had significant depression all these years. That's why I've been struggling with addiction in my life. I've been dealing with ins and outs of medical issue and addiction and lots of anxiety, and I've been told I have post-traumatic stress disorder. So it all will come out. Childhood trauma comes out in different forms as an adult. And we don't always realize that long-term effects. So let's look at emotional and mental health effects. Childhood trauma, again, I made a note here, it results in the anxiety, depression, and here's a key, difficulty in regulating our emotions. You're just like, oh, my moods are up and down. I can't seem to control my anger. Fear overwhelms me. The waves come in and out. And that's what we're talking about. Inability to modulate or regulate our emotions. You may notice that you have a hypersensitive response, hypervigilant as an adult. Everything kind of throws you off. And that could be as well. We know that there is the physical consequences. Heart disease has been listed, autoimmune disorders, chronic pain. We don't fully understand everything that trauma does to the physical body, except you will have symptoms. It does come out. It could be headaches. It could be inflammation, but it could be issues within your body that are just unexplainable. We tend to see a lot of gastrointestinal issues as well. There is the impact on relationships. Survivors are going to struggle, obviously, with trust, building an emotionally close, trusting relationship, intimacy, and then big piece is forming healthy attachments, where I just can't seem to attach to another person in a healthy bond and have a healthy relationship, but I can have these episodic attachments to a lot of really unhealthy people, and I go from relationship to relationship. So let me mention, final one I want to mention here is cognitive challenges, early brain development that leads to memory issues, difficulty concentrating. This prefrontal cortex, you may find it's just hard to concentrate and make good decisions. We sometimes refer to this as the wise mind. It's where I'm supposed to be making my good decisions. And the more primitive part of the brain, where I could be more reactive, may seem like it's controlling my life, that fight or flight, and I'm always on that edge. So how do we heal from childhood trauma? Understanding, first of all, the effects it's had in our life. We've got to understand that. And I'll just say, after 40 years, I do know that trauma is possible to heal from. I do know that people who stay with it can walk in healing and recovery that they didn't believe was possible. I also know that we can acknowledge and, number one, and be aware this has had an effect on my life. I maybe not even realizing the great effect. Maybe I have trouble with forgiveness and I've become a very embittered person. Maybe I'm full of blame, but you've got to look and go, okay, I know it affected me in so many ways and I need to deal with that. All right. Building a support system. Is number 2. Cultivating relationships with supportive individuals is a key. You've got to get the right people into your life. Sometimes have had a pattern of choosing the really, really unhealthy. And part of what we do is we've got to reestablish what are safe, what are healthy relationships. And, we forget the basic self-care, healthy coping strategies. There's something called mindfulness. I like to also look at how do I do proper relaxation, even my physical body as well. There's journaling. There's a whole, journaling is really powerful. I don't want to brush over that, where I'm really 15 minutes a day, I am logging the effects, the emotions, how I'm going to deal with things differently. But I am beginning to document, and a lot of things will come to mind, by the way. We also know that there are grounding exercises, how to re-anchor back into safety and reality. There's a whole set of tools that we teach in the DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, as one area. So the term these days is trauma-informed. Maybe that's a little confusing, but trauma-informed is that a therapist, a professional, really does have the understanding and awareness that impact of trauma in one's life. And this is why the importance of the whole person approach. The whole person approach. I've got to look at how this affects my relationships, my physical health, myself, how I see myself, my spiritual health, my faith, how I'm going to look at caring for myself in the future, all my relationships. Trauma can have it's like a toxic effect in every area of my life, and I don't even realize how much. So, a lot of different options. There's even lifespan integration therapy and processes that we do. Part of this is I want you to know there are avenues to deal with trauma, and individuals are surprised at the level of recovery. I'll never make false promises, but at the level of recovery and healing that they can have in their life. So it's powerful. It is something that you can deal with. And one lady said, you know what, if I really dealt with what happened with me, I would lose my mind. I would go crazy. And the reality is that's how it feels. You won't. But that's how it feels. That's how overwhelming. And so we'll do a lot of avoidance behaviors through our life. And we end up being self-destructive, and self-forgiveness has to enter in, and forgiveness around trauma. What does that really mean? So that's why I entitled the book Triumph Over Trauma. Through the right processes, through what I'm going to believe is even divine intervention, there can and is healing for trauma. I can say that today, sitting here, because I've seen it in hundreds of lives, and probably many more than that, the healing from trauma. Hope comes when there's a plan. Let's put together a beginning plan and build upon that so that we can move towards a life of recovery, and probably a level of joy, enjoyment, even purpose for our life that we've maybe not had before.